The quiet hum of the classroom was filled with the soft buzz of pencils scratching against paper. The air felt dense with concentration as the clock ticked steadily, counting down the final moments of a history test. Princess Charlotte sat poised at her desk, her eyes fixed on the paper before her. Among the questions was one that stood out: in which year did World War I begin? It was the last test she had to complete before the nationwide junior ESS competition, a contest she had participated in every year since learning to read and write. Around her, the other students were deeply absorbed in their work. Some moved quickly through the questions, while others paused to chew on their pens, their faces etched with forced concentration. For most, it was just another test, another hurdle in the routine of school life, but for Charlotte, this test carried more weight. Her performance was always under scrutiny, royalty was never allowed to be mediocre. As Charlotte read through the possible answers to the question, her fingers tightened around her pencil. The options were neatly listed, but her gaze lingered on the first one. It was wrong. The year given was off by several years. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly scanned the other choices, only to find the same mistake repeated. Charlotte bit her lip as her mind raced. She knew the correct year, her grasp of history was strong. She also understood the implications of letting such an error go unnoticed. Shifting in her seat, she glanced around the room. James Fitzgerald, sitting a few rows away, scribbled hastily, seemingly oblivious to the mistake. He appeared eager to finish, his eyes darting over his paper. Charlotte hesitated. Speaking up would draw attention, and she could already feel the heavy weight of her title. Being royalty meant being perfect at all times. Her hands trembled slightly as she set her pencil down, deciding that doing the right thing outweighed her fears. Slowly raising her hand, Charlotte looked toward Mr. Thompson, who stood by the whiteboard reviewing his notes. He glanced over, his expression unreadable. Charlotte's heart pounded as she waited. "Yes, Charlotte?" Mr. Thompson asked, his voice a mixture of curiosity and mild amusement at the unexpected interruption. "I think there's an error on the test, sir," Charlotte said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The years for World War I are incorrect." The room fell silent. Charlotte felt every pair of eyes on her. Some classmates exchanged glances, while others froze in their seats. James raised an eyebrow, visibly annoyed. Mr. Thompson's face shifted from amusement to a subtle frown. "Are you sure, Charlotte?" he asked, his tone dismissive. "Perhaps you're mistaken. We'll review it later." Charlotte, however, refused to back down. "No, sir. I'm certain the year is wrong," she replied firmly, her voice steady despite the mounting tension. The quiet murmur of disbelief in the room was palpable. It wasn't just about the mistake, it was about her boldness in correcting her teacher. "Smarty pants at it again," James muttered in a cold, snarky tone, loud enough for some to hear. "She says the question's wrong like she knows everything." Charlotte ignored him. They had never gotten along, and his barbs no longer stung. "And what if she's right, James?" Ellie Parker, Charlotte's friend, countered. "Wouldn't it mean all the other questions could be wrong too?" "Learn to stay quiet when you're not spoken to, E for elephant," James retorted sharply, his voice dripping with sarcasm. His remark finally drew Mr. Thompson's stern attention. "Quiet," he said, his voice rising above the others. "And you, James, mind the words you use in this class." James sank into his chair, silent but visibly seething. Mr. Thompson's gaze shifted back to Charlotte, his hesitation evident as his fingers tapped nervously on the desk. "We'll look into it after class, Charlotte," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Please continue." But Charlotte couldn't just let it go. Her decision was firm. Standing her ground, her voice steady, she added, "The correct year is 1914, sir. Not 1913, 1922, or any of the other years written here." She met Mr. Thompson's gaze, her heart pounding as he stared at her for a long moment before turning his attention to the rest of the class. "All right. Everyone," he said, forcing a smile, "let's wrap up. We'll review the test afterward." He moved on quickly, but Charlotte could feel the shift in the room. Murmurs began, soft but enough to make her feel exposed, even vulnerable. She turned back to her paper, trying to focus, but her mind raced with doubts. Had she made a mistake? Would this cause more trouble? As the class ended and the bell rang, Charlotte gathered her belongings, trying to ignore the stares of her classmates. James didn't speak to her, but his lingering gaze as he walked out carried an unspoken judgment. Outside, the sun shone brightly over the courtyard, but Charlotte felt none of its warmth. The courtyard, usually a peaceful escape, now felt like her stage, where all eyes were on her. Finding a quiet bench in a secluded corner, she sat with her hands resting on her lap, replaying the morning's events. Her boldness, a decision made in a flash, now weighed heavily on her. Had she done the right thing? Mr. Thompson's vague reaction offered no comfort. Her actions had felt necessary in the moment, but doubt crept in. What if she got in trouble for disrupting the peace? Her parents would surely be disappointed. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of familiar footsteps. Ellie walked over and sat beside her, her gaze soft and understanding. "Are you okay?" Ellie asked, her voice light but tinged with concern. Charlotte sighed and leaned back against the bench. "I don't know, Ellie. I'm not sure I should have said anything. What if they think I'm just trying to make a scene or that I'm showing off?" She looked at Ellie, her eyes searching for reassurance. Ellie smiled, a warm grin that had always comforted Charlotte in moments like these. Ellie was a bright and charming young woman, not born into the same privilege as Charlotte, but their bond ran deep. Over the years, Ellie had become a source of comfort and acceptance, offering Charlotte the true friendship she craved. Ellie admired Charlotte for her intelligence and kindness, but more importantly, she saw her as a regular person striving to find her place. Together, they had forged a powerful partnership, excelling academically and winning competitions for their school. Ellie had always been Charlotte's escape from the pressures of royal expectations and an invaluable ally. "Charlotte, you did the right thing," Ellie said simply. "The test was wrong, and you corrected it. It's not about being perfect, it's about being honest." Her words, though simple, were powerful. Charlotte held onto them but still hesitated. What about everyone else? What if they think it wasn't about honesty but that I was trying to outshine them? Ellie's tone turned firm but light-hearted. "Who cares what they think? You did what was right. If they can't see that, it's their problem." She nudged Charlotte playfully. "And you know what? I think they respect you for it. It's not every day someone calls out a teacher, especially someone like you." Charlotte exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath. Ellie's words lifted some of the weight off her shoulders, making her feel lighter. Maybe Ellie was right. Maybe this wasn't about looking good, it was about doing what was right, no matter the cost. Even if some people didn't understand, it didn't matter. The bell rang, signaling the end of the break period, and as they stood to head back to class, Charlotte felt a renewed sense of determination. She couldn't change what had happened, but she could move forward with her head held high. The next class was history again, but this time, the atmosphere was different. Mr. Thompson had gone to the headmaster to discuss the error Charlotte had pointed out. When the class settled in, the door opened, and the headmaster himself walked in. He was a tall man with a stern face, but there was a hint of respect in his gaze as he looked at Charlotte. "Class, I'd like to take a moment," the headmaster said, his voice calm but firm. "I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a small oversight in today's test. Princess Charlotte pointed out an error in the year for World War I. She was correct. I commend her for her attention to detail and her courage to speak up." The room fell silent. Charlotte felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't look down, she didn't need to. This wasn't about seeking validation, it was about standing up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. As the headmaster spoke, a soft clapping began from the back of the room. It was tentative at first, but as more students joined in, it grew louder. The applause swelled until the entire class rose to a standing ovation, clapping for her. It wasn't just the correction they were applauding, it was the courage it took to stand up, challenge the norm, and do the right thing when no one else would. Charlotte stood there, caught between pride and surprise. This wasn't how she had imagined it. She had expected reprimands, perhaps even scorn, but instead, she was receiving something much more valuable: respect. As the clapping died down, Charlotte found herself smiling, the weight of the day lifting. She had done what she believed was right, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The school day came to a close, and Charlotte found herself walking out of the building with Ellie by her side. The day had been full of unexpected twists, but as they approached the school gates, Charlotte felt lighter. The storm inside her had passed. She had been honest, corrected the test error, and received a standing ovation for it. What more could she ask for? Later that evening, back at Kensington Palace, Charlotte sat by the window in her room, gazing at the twinkling lights of the city. Her parents entered, the door opening and shutting quietly behind them. They had heard the news. "Mom," Charlotte's voice trailed off as she turned to face her parents, her eyes calm and searching, waiting to be sure of the moment before speaking. "Well done, Charlotte," Kate said, her voice warm with pride. "You did the right thing," her father, Prince William, added, beaming brightly. "Of course," William responded in a lofty tone. "I hear everything about you, my little eaglet." Charlotte smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. It wasn't about the standing ovation or the applause. It was about knowing she had done something good, something important. For the first time, she felt that her role as a princess meant more than just wearing a crown. It meant standing up for truth and challenging norms, even when no one expected her to. In that moment, Charlotte realized something significant: leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about having the courage to speak up, to correct what was wrong, and to stay true to who you are. That, she knew, was the most valuable lesson of all. In the days that followed, Charlotte and Ellie immersed themselves in study at the school's library, preparing for the junior essay competition. Charlotte had initially wanted to write about the adverse effects of plastic litter and waste on the oceans, but she changed her mind. She had a better idea, one she was sure would win her the gold: the little mistakes teachers make and how they affect students' growth. As she scribbled slowly one day in the library, she looked up at Ellie and said, "This title is quite long, isn't it?" hoping for a sincere response. Ellie started softly, "There's no such thing as right or wrong, long or short, when it comes to being creative. If it feels right in your heart, then it most certainly is." Charlotte found herself smiling. Sometimes she wondered if she and Ellie were truly the same age. Ellie was so wise. Charlotte decided to keep the title and continued working on her essay, which explored how even adults and teachers are not above making mistakes. She emphasized the importance of care and caution, encouraging more teachers to adopt the qualities of Mr. Thompson: gentle, courteous, and attentive to the students around them. What do you think of Charlotte's ability to speak up, even when it meant standing up to authority? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire bravery and integrity. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.